They picked the wrong man to mess with. A gang tries to intimidate Mike Tyson. Seconds later, they regret it. Watch until the end. The sun hung low in the afternoon sky, casting an orange glow over the streets of Ironwood, a rugged urban district known for its mix of cultures, bustling street markets, and the lurking dangers of territorial gangs. It wasn't a place for tourists or outsiders. People who didn't belong quickly learned to walk fast and keep their heads down. But Mike Tyson wasn't just anyone. Dressed in a simple hoodie and sweatpants, the former heavyweight champion of the world strolled through the crowded Ironwood Market, enjoying the mix of sizzling street food aromas and the hum of vendors calling out their specials. He had always liked places like this, where real people lived, where the heart of a city pulsed strongest. Stopping by a small fruit stall, he caught the attention of an elderly vendor, Abuela Rosa, a woman no taller than his chest, but with eyes that had seen lifetimes. She grinned, her weathered hands arranging a pile of ripe oranges. "Senor, you have the hands of a fighter," she said, eyeing him curiously. "I've seen those fists somewhere before." Tyson chuckled, his deep voice warm but restrained. "Not anymore, ma'am. Just a guy looking for some good fruit. Got the best ones here?" Rosa beamed, handing him the juiciest orange. "For you? On the house. A champion deserves the best." Tyson took the fruit with a grateful nod, peeling it as he walked deeper into the market. But the moment of peace didn't last. From the shadows of a liquor store across the street, a group of 5 menacing figures leaned against a graffiti-covered wall, their eyes locked onto the former champ. They were not fans. Ricardo Rico Morales, the leader of the local gang known as the Iron Vipers, squinted at Tyson. His sharp, inked fingers drummed against a flick knife at his waist. Beside him stood Marcos, Javier, Tito, and Nico, each one exuding raw aggression, their postures tight with misplaced confidence. "Yo, Rico," Marcos murmured, nodding toward Tyson. "Ain't that the boxer guy? The one from TV?" Rico sneered. "So what? What's he doing in our neighborhood? Thinks he can just walk through like he owns the place?" The gang exchanged smirks. The market had always been their hunting ground, a place where they demanded tolls from anyone they considered an outsider. Tyson, in their eyes, was just another big shot who didn't belong. Rico, his ego inflated by the eyes of his crew, pushed off the wall and swaggered toward Tyson, his steps slow and deliberate. The gang followed, their presence like a brewing storm. Tyson, sensing the shift in energy, kept walking, unfazed. He'd been in more fights than he could count. If trouble found him, he knew how to deal with it. But Rico wasn't about to let that happen. "Hey, viejo!" Rico barked, his voice laced with false amusement. "Where you think you're going? You lost, big man?" Tyson took a slow breath, not bothering to look at him. "Not lost, just passing through." The gang chuckled, closing in, forming a loose semicircle around him. "Passing through?" Rico scoffed. "Nah, see? You gotta pay to pass through. That's how it works around here. Ain't that right, boys?" His gang murmured in agreement, their grins widening. Tyson finally turned, his towering frame casting a shadow over Rico. His gaze was sharp, measured, not angry, but watchful. "I don't pay to walk," he said simply. A tense silence crackled in the air. Rico's smirk faltered, but he masked it with bravado. "That's so?" he jeered. "Man, you must think you're special, just 'cause you were on TV? That don't mean nothing here. This is our block. And you?" He jabbed a finger into Tyson's chest. "You don't belong here." The shove came next, sudden and forceful. Rico's hand struck Tyson's shoulder, pushing hard, but Tyson barely moved, his body solid as stone. The gang's laughter faded slightly as they realized the shift in atmosphere. Tyson's jaw clenched. He had given them a chance to let it go, but they weren't going to take it. Rico, seeing no reaction, scowled and shoved him again, harder this time. "What? You scared?" Rico sneered. Still, Tyson didn't react, but his fists slowly curled at his sides, his breathing steady, controlled. The gang sensed the danger now. Marcos, feeling emboldened, took it a step further. He reached for Tyson's bag of oranges and slapped it out of his hands, sending the fruit rolling onto the pavement. The market went dead silent. Shoppers froze in place, watching in stunned horror. Even the street musicians stopped playing. Tyson exhaled through his nose, slowly turning his gaze down at the spilled fruit. His knuckles flexed. He finally looked up. His eyes, once calm, now burned with cold, lethal precision. Rico saw the shift. For the first time, his cocky smirk faltered. "You shouldn't have done that," Tyson said, his voice low and chilling. The gang's laughter stopped completely. Marcos swallowed, stepping back slightly, but Rico, desperate to keep control, snarled and threw a punch. It was the worst mistake of his life. Before his fist even got close, Tyson moved, and everything changed. The streets of Ironwood Market were no stranger to tension, but today, an eerie silence began to settle over the bustling vendors and shoppers. The gang of five had drawn closer, their predatory grins widening as they surrounded Mike Tyson, like vultures closing in on wounded prey. Rico Razor Morales, the self-proclaimed king of these streets, took a bold step forward, his fingers twitching near the switchblade tucked into his waistband. "Yo, VAO," he sneered, his voice laced with venom. "You got a problem with how we do things here?" Tyson, standing calm but unshaken, let out a slow breath. He had seen this look before, the arrogance, the hunger for a fight. He wasn't intimidated, not in the slightest. "No problem," Tyson said, his voice measured, almost disappointed. "I'm just trying to enjoy my day. You should do the same." The gang exchanged glances before Tavo, a wiry thug with tattooed arms, let out a sharp, barking laugh. "You hear that, Rico? He's trying to give us advice." The others chuckled darkly, their jeers echoing through the market, making some bystanders take cautious steps backward. Vendors froze in place, watching the scene unfold, afraid to interfere. But Rico wasn't laughing. His expression darkened as he squared up to Tyson, his eyes flicking to his gang for a silent signal. They had a game to play, and their victim just wasn't getting it. "You're standing in our market, old man," Rico spat, pressing a finger into Tyson's chest, "and that means you gotta pay up." Tyson glanced down at Rico's hand, then back into his eyes. "And if I don't?" The gang hooted in delight, sensing the confrontation heating up. "Then we take what we want," snarled Vince, another gang member, his eyes gleaming as he snatched the bag of oranges from Tyson's hand and hurled it to the ground. The fruit burst upon impact, rolling across the pavement. The crowd gasped. It was a small gesture, but the message was loud and clear. This wasn't just about a toll anymore. This was a test. Tyson clenched his jaw. He could feel the heat rising in his chest, his body reacting instinctively, years of training and discipline telling him exactly what needed to happen next, but he held himself back. For now. "You shouldn't have done that," Tyson murmured, his voice dangerously low. The gang snickered, mistaking his restraint for weakness. Rico, emboldened by Tyson's lack of reaction, smirked. "Oh no, look fellas, I think we made the big man mad." Tavo grinned. "What's he gonna do? Cry about his oranges?" Rico, licking his lips, shoved Tyson hard. The market fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Tyson barely moved. His breathing was slow, controlled. His fists flexed at his sides. He gave them a warning. They didn't take it. Now they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Rico, sensing the shift in the air, sneered again, but with a flicker of uncertainty. "What's wrong, champ?" Rico taunted, stepping in closer. "You ain't got nothing left? You just some washed-up old man?" The gang closed in tighter, cutting off any escape. Tyson slowly raised his head, locking eyes with Rico. The energy around him changed. His breathing deepened, his shoulders squared, his body shifted ever so slightly into position. It was subtle, but to a trained eye, it was a kill switch being flipped. For the first time, the gang hesitated. They felt it. But Rico, refusing to lose face in front of his crew, took it one step further. He reached into his waistband, pulling out a rusted brass knuckle and slipping it onto his fingers. The crowd gasped in horror. Now it was no longer about intimidation. This was an attack. "Let's see if those hands still work," Rico growled, throwing the first punch. Tyson moved like lightning. Before Rico's fist even fully extended, Tyson dipped to the side, dodging it by a fraction of an inch. And then the world exploded. Bam! A single right hook from Tyson detonated against Rico's ribs, sending him staggering back 3 full steps. The gang leader let out a wheezing gasp, his body curling inward as he clutched his side. The sheer force of the impact stole the air from his lungs. The market erupted in shock. The gang's eyes widened. They didn't realize it yet, but the fight was already over. Tyson straightened, rolling his shoulders. His expression never changed. One down. And now, the rest of them. The gang's mocking laughter echoed through the crowded streets of Ironwood Market, their false bravado thick in the air. They had pushed too far. The shoppers, frozen in place, held their breath. They had seen street fights before, but this was different. Rico Razor Morales, still clutching his ribs from Tyson's devastating punch, forced himself up, rage replacing the pain. He couldn't back down, not in front of his crew, not in front of the crowd. With a sneer, he spat blood onto the pavement and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Big mistake, viejo." His voice was sharp, his words dripping with malice. The gang tightened their circle, their hands twitching toward weapons, brass knuckles, switchblades, even a length of steel pipe. One of them, Nico, a tattooed thug with a wicked scar across his jaw, let out a low chuckle and cracked his knuckles. "You messed up, old man." Tyson's eyes remained locked on Rico, his expression unreadable, his stance calm yet coiled like a panther. And then, the final mistake. Rico lunged forward and shoved Tyson hard. The force barely made Tyson budge, but it was the final insult. The air grew heavy. Even the gang members felt it now. Something had shifted. Tyson took a slow, measured step backward, then lifted his head, his eyes flashing like a storm brewing over the ocean. His fingers curled into fists, tight, unyielding. Then, in a voice cold as steel, he muttered, "All right. You asked for it." Tyson moved faster than anyone expected. His right hook connected first, a thunderous impact that sent Rico's head snapping sideways, his body crumpling like a rag doll. Before Rico even hit the ground, Tyson was already on the next target. Nico swung the steel pipe. Tyson dodged, slipping beneath the wild arc, and in the same motion, bam! A vicious uppercut sent Nico flying backward, crashing into a fruit stand, the wooden crates shattering under the impact. The market erupted into chaos. The gang members staggered back, their cocky bravado shattered. The onlookers, who had once watched in silent dread, now erupted into cheers. "Holy crap, he's taking them apart! Did you see that punch? That guy's out cold!" Even Maria, the elderly vendor, was pumping her fist in the air. "You show these hoodlums, Mr. Tyson, teach 'em a lesson." Vince, now desperate, charged at Tyson with a switchblade, his hand trembling. But Tyson was already moving. With an effortless twist, he caught Vince's wrist mid-air, twisted it backward. Snap! Vince screamed in agony, the knife clattering to the pavement as he dropped to his knees. Tyson barely glanced at him before turning to the next opponent, Carlos, the last thug standing. His face was a twisted mask of terror, his confidence shattered. He hesitated, gripping his brass knuckles tightly. Tyson stared him down. "Go home, kid." Carlos's hands shook. The crowd watched, holding their breath. Then he ran. The market erupted into applause, the tension breaking like a floodgate. Shoppers cheered, clapping and shouting, their fear replaced with relief and admiration. A few bold onlookers recorded everything, their phones capturing what would soon become a viral sensation. "Did you see that?" He took them all down. Mike Tyson just cleaned house. Rico, half-conscious, groaned in pain, his body twisted on the pavement. Nico and Vince, still stunned, didn't even try to move. Tyson exhaled slowly, his fists loosening. His work was done, but the sirens were already wailing in the distance. The police were coming, and the night was far from over. The shrill screech of sirens filled the night air as two police cruisers skidded to a halt at the chaotic scene. Red and blue lights flashed, reflecting off the shattered fruit crates and the battered bodies of the defeated gang members. The once rowdy market was now silent, every pair of eyes fixated on the arrival of law enforcement. The fight was over, but the war wasn't won just yet. The moment the officers stepped out, their hands hovered near their holsters, their sharp gazes scanning the wreckage of human arrogance Tyson had left behind. Officer Daniels, a tall, seasoned cop with a no-nonsense attitude, took the lead. His partner, Officer Kim, younger and more cautious, followed closely, already radioing for backup. Daniels' brow furrowed as he surveyed the scene. A gang of thugs, battered, broken, groaning, a crowd, cheering, energized, emboldened, and then, in the center of it all, Mike Tyson, standing tall, chest rising and falling in measured breaths. Daniels exhaled sharply. All right, what the hell happened here? Before Tyson could even open his mouth, the crowd surged forward, their voices a thunderous wave of support. A young woman, still gripping her phone with shaking hands, shoved the screen toward Daniels. The footage played back in perfect clarity, the gang attacking first, Tyson defending himself, and then delivering a beatdown that would make history. Bystander 1, her voice unwavering. These punks started it. They were harassing people, trying to shake down vendors. If Mr. Tyson hadn't stepped in, someone would have gotten seriously hurt. Bystander 2, his face still filled with adrenaline. He didn't throw a single punch until they laid hands on him. They deserved every bit of that. Daniels glanced at the video, his jaw tightening. The thugs on the ground weren't just beaten, they were broken. Even Kim, the younger officer, looked at the footage and let out a low whistle. Justice is served. Daniels motioned to the fallen gang members, his tone curt. Get them up, cuff them. The officers moved in, hauling the gang members onto their feet, or at least what was left of them. Rico Razor Morales, the so-called leader, was barely conscious, his face swollen beyond recognition. Officer Kim, shaking his head, muttered, "Damn, you guys got your asses handed to you." As the cops slapped the handcuffs on, Vince, the one who had wielded a knife, spat blood onto the pavement, his voice hoarse from pain. "You don't understand. He's not normal. He's some kind of monster." Daniels, who had spent years dealing with street criminals, rolled his eyes. "Yeah? Well, monsters don't get arrested. You do." He turned to Tyson, his expression hard to read, part respect, part caution. Daniels crossed his arms. Mike Tyson, the Mike Tyson. Tyson nodded, wiping his hands against his jeans, as if brushing off the last remnants of the fight. "Yeah." Daniels exhaled, rubbing his temples. Of all the days to respond to a call, today had to be the day a group of idiots decided to fight Iron Mike. He gestured toward the cuffs on the gang members. "You know, some people might call this excessive force." Tyson tilted his head slightly, then shrugged. "Some people weren't here." The officer grinned despite himself. "Fair point." Kim, still watching the footage, let out a low chuckle. "I mean, do we even need to process them? I think Tyson already sentenced them." The crowd laughed, the tension in the air finally starting to ease. As the officers dragged Rico toward the police car, the gang leader suddenly found his voice again. His eyes, bloodshot, swollen, filled with rage, locked onto Tyson. and in a voice raspy from pain, he snarled, "Who the hell are you?" Tyson studied him for a moment, then smirked. "I'm just a guy who doesn't like bullies." He turned his back on Rico and walked away, leaving the gang leader to stew in his own humiliation and shattered pride. The market roars for Tyson. As the police cars pulled away, the crowd exploded into cheers. "Tyson! Tyson! Tyson!" Vendors clapped, children jumped up and down, and even Maria, the elderly fruit vendor, wiped away a tear. She hobbled forward, pressing an extra orange into Tyson's palm, her voice warm. "For the hero." Tyson chuckled, tossing the orange in the air before catching it. "I was just shopping for some fruit." The crowd laughed, the weight of the evening finally lifting. Tyson turned and walked off, the market parting for him like he was Moses leading his people through the sea. Behind him, a legend had just been written in fists and blood, and before the night was over, the whole world would know about it. Here's the final part of your action-packed story, keeping Mike Tyson's legendary presence intact while ensuring an epic conclusion that ties everything together. The legend grows. With calm precision, Tyson bent down, picked up his bag of oranges, and brushed the dust from them like it was nothing more than an afterthought. The same hands that had just dismantled a gang with brutal efficiency now gently cradled a piece of fruit. As he slung the bag over his arm, the crowd erupted once more, voices calling out his name, cheers of admiration rippling through the air. Strangers who had only moments ago feared for their safety now stood united, bound by the shared awe of witnessing something extraordinary. Tyson nodded to Maria, who stood behind her stall, hands clasped over her heart. "You're a good man, Mr. Tyson," she whispered. Tyson simply smiled and tipped his head before turning and walking away from the wreckage left behind. The internet breaks. By the time Tyson reached the edge of the market, his face was already lighting up phone screens across the world. Within minutes, the footage of the fight hit social media, spreading faster than wildfire. Comments flooded in. "Did y'all just see Mike Tyson take out a whole gang?" "Iron Mike is still undefeated." "Imagine thinking you can jump Mike Tyson of all people." The news cycle exploded. CNN headline, "Mike Tyson crushes local gang in self-defense. Internet reacts." Fox News, "Former champion stops violent attack. Is Tyson a hero?" BBC, "Mike Tyson fights back against bullies and the world cheers." The entire world was talking about him once again. The message hits home. With the eyes of the world on him, Tyson knew he had a choice. Let the moment pass or make it mean something. Standing before a sea of cameras, his voice was steady, his message clear. "We all gotta stand up for what's right. Size, strength, none of that matters. Courage does. If someone tries to push you down, don't be afraid to fight back." His words ignited a movement. People across the country stood up to bullies, fought for justice, and refused to be intimidated. The consequences of weakness. Meanwhile, the gang members who had once thought themselves untouchable were now locked away, stripped of their arrogance, their power, their freedom. In a maximum security prison, their heads hung low, their bruises still fresh. As the prison warden, Officer Williams, strolled past their cell, he smirked. "So, which one of you geniuses thought it was a good idea to fight Mike Tyson?" No one spoke because they knew they had picked the wrong fight, and the whole world had watched them lose. Life is full of challenges, and bullies come in many forms, whether they're individuals abusing power or groups trying to intimidate others. Mike Tyson's story teaches us that true strength isn't just about physical power. It's about standing up for what's right. In a world where injustice and discrimination still exist, we must have the courage to fight back, not just with fists, but with unity, resilience, and the truth. Social media amplifies our voices, making it harder for oppression to be ignored. Never be afraid to defend yourself and others, because justice always prevails when people stand together. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe Undercover Insights channel.